MCAT 2017 Cram Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Flashcard Set 13.3, Walt Whitman, Poet of the People. As you view the reading of this passage, you'll notice a few highlighted sections of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these selections in order to answer the reasoning within the text question that follows at the end. This question will require you to analyze the strength of evidentiary relationships among component parts of the author's argument. It's really not that bad, so good luck and happy reading. Paragraph 1. The first publication of Leaves of Grass by now famous poet Walt Whitman was a failure. People like to believe that they can recognize excellence when they see it, but the fact remains that they cannot and will not unless it assumes a familiar form. It is quite simple for university professors and literary critics to praise Whitman and his book today. It was impossible for them to do so in 1860. Paragraph 2. The first quality in the book to repel readers was the verse form. In the poetry of Whitman, there was no apparent pattern. His poems seemed to be prose passages cut up and arranged to look like verse. After the academic critics accepted Whitman, many learned justifications were put forward concerning his verse. One professor argued that in rejecting the rhythm of the line, the usual rhythm in conventional verse, for the rhythm of the phrase, the rhythm of natural speech, Whitman was simply following a good American custom of ignoring verse patterns as the eyes see them and following the sound as the ears hear it. Another maintained that Whitman consciously combined rhythmic features of prose meaning written or spoken language in its ordinary form without metrical structure, and conventional verse in order to evolve a new form. A number have expended considerable energy trying to show that, and these definitions in brackets are not a part of the original text. This is just for more clarity, okay? So in poetry, the repetition of the sound of a vowel or diphthong in non-rhyming stressed syllables near enough to each other for the echo to be discernible, such as penitence, reticence, okay? Alliteration, and alliteration is the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. And parallelism, the use of successive verbal constructions in poetry or prose that correspond in grammatical structure, sound, meter, meaning, etc. Okay, and for those of you who don't know what a diphthong is, it's a sound formed by the combination of two vowels in a single syllable, in which the sound begins on one vowel and moves toward the other, such as the OI in coin and the OU in loud. All right? Okay. Features found in much conventional poetry are not missing from Whitman's verse, but all hasten meaning be quick to do something, to argue that the verse form in Leaves of Grass is not as unorthodox as it appears. Paragraph 3. The second quality in the book to repel readers was the obvious confusion shown by Whitman between nature and art. All great poetry from the golden age of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides to the middle of the 19th century is marked by careful discrimination between raw nature and art. Aristotle laid down the principle that the most beautiful colors laid on a confusedly laid on confusedly will not give so much pleasure as the chalk outline of a portrait. Longan has said that nature fills the place of good fortune, art that of good judgment, and that too many images make for confusion rather than intensity. And Demetrius wrote that not all possible points should be punctiliously and tediously elaborated, but some should be left for the comprehension and inference of the hearer. The great ancient critics apparently believed that the primary function of the artist was to select from nature certain details which would be representative, vivid, and coherent, and which could be architectonically, this word meaning having an organized and unified structure that suggests an architectural design. So architectonically organized. The artist had to differentiate sharply between nature, whether it was human or physical, and art, which was the representation of nature, organized and processed into a coherent form. Paragraph 4. But Whitman made no such fine differentiation. Whitman believed the poet is merely the channel of thoughts and things without increase or diminution, diminution meaning a reduction in extent, size, or importance of something. The absurd error of considering nature and art as distinct was never made by Whitman. As a result, Leaves of Grass was definitely something new in the literary world, for it was an attempt to reproduce life precisely as the poet saw it, with no effort made to select material or organize it. Paragraph 5. The third quality in Leaves of Grass to repel readers was the intense individualism of the poet. Of all arts, poetry is one of the most egotistic. Excessive concern for oneself with or without exaggerated feelings of self-importance. The world accepts the fact, for no one questions Shakespeare's bland assertion that as long as his verse lives, his mistress will live. I celebrate myself and sing myself. Whitman wrote in Song of Myself, and from that theme he rarely departed. No poet has used the personal pronoun I as frequently as Whitman has. The author quotes the views of other critics in order to support which claim about Whitman's poetry. A, that the imagery was too inclusive. B, that it lacked pattern verse. C, that it distorted nature. Or D, that it was publicly repudiated. Definitely press pause if you need to, and I'll give you a moment to think. If you're having difficulty answering, open up a second window to view paragraphs 2 and 3 of the passage and search for text support to select the correct answer choice. All right. This reasoning within the text question basically wants you to recall the claim an author is trying to support with a piece of evidence, okay? So, while the author mentions pattern verse and public repudiation, repudiation meaning rejection of a proposal or idea, in the passage as real factors in the initial failure of Leaves of Grass, the author does not support these ideas with quotes from critics, okay? And including too much detail and failing to selectively choose what aspects of natural imagery to include in his art, which is what answer choice A is saying, is supported by numerous quotations by ancient philosophers and poets in paragraph 3. The critique of Whitman's work is that it was too reflective of nature and thus not art, which is almost the opposite of saying it distorted nature, because it really didn't, and kind of just replicated it. So with all this said, that's why the correct answer choice is answer choice A, that the imagery was too inclusive. All right.